I am here with Kiirsi Hellewell. She was Susan Powell's best friend for about 7 years before she went missing. I was just listening to an interview with you and me from 10 years ago. I can't believe it's been that long, and so much has happened since then. It was actually, I'll be honest, and before we start talking about the news today and what we know as far as Susan's remains, it was a little bit heartbreaking to listen to our interview in many ways. I interviewed you about 2 years after Susan went missing. Our interview was in 2011. It was also 2 months before Josh took his life and Charlie and Braden's life, his boys. And so when we spoke, those 2 little boys were still alive. And one of the quotes you said was, "Why is it taking so long? It just can't take this long." And you kept talking about the boys. And so my heart goes out to you. And I was really, really hoping that this would be closure for you and everyone that loved Susan and her and the Cox family. Susan Cox Powell, was her full name. So tell me a little bit about what we've learned today. Did you say you just got off the phone with Susan's dad? Is that right?
Right, a few minutes ago.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about the news today and what Susan's dad said to you.
So when Chuck called me, he had already texted me last night to tell me the results, but he gave me a little bit more details today. He told me that the bones that were found in the mine were animal bones, not human. Okay. And that the pants that were found, which I thought looked like women's dress pants when I saw them, had a lot of different profiles of male DNA on them. And so they're trying to see, a family member of Josh's is going to give them a DNA sample today to see if that might match, any of the DNA profiles might match Josh. But there were a lot of people down in the mine digging and handling the things that they found. So it could have come from them. We don't know. And they also have not begun testing the sock that was found or the scrap of a shirt. So they're going to start doing that also.
Okay. I knew about the dress pants and I saw you actually, or a quote from you on the news about touching those dress pants and believing they were about her size. Susan was petite. She was 28 years old when she went missing. She was so young, a young mother. And she worked, and dress pants were her thing. She wore them often to go to work. And so at this point, you're saying there are multiple DNA profiles on that.
On the pants, yes. They did find several different kinds of DNA that they said were male.
Okay. How are you feeling today after hearing this news?
It's been a very emotional couple of weeks. I go back and forth many times a day, talking myself out of believing that maybe it's her, maybe we found some at least some part of her final resting place, and then rational thought will come back in, and I'll think, no, it's not her. There's too many weird things about it. Why would Josh throw pants down in the mine? Why wouldn't he burn them? It would be quick and easy to get rid of them that way. That doesn't make sense. But it is weird that something like what looks like women's dress pants were thrown down a mine, and then all of the timbers and the wood at the top were burned and thrown down inside after that, as if they were trying to cover it up. So those things kind of made me think, well, maybe there is a chance it could be her. But when I got the news last night, I don't know, I guess I kind of felt resigned. Just kind of thought, okay, well, once again, this has kind of been, in a way, a wild goose chase. But at least we know that she's most likely not down this mine. At least it's one place that we have wanted to be checked since 2010 that's now off the list, and we can go on looking somewhere else.
Okay. Who told you the news last night?
Chuck, Susan's dad, texted me, and I also heard from another source that had talked to one of the mine searchers.
Okay. When we again talked a decade ago, we discussed all the mines that had been searched. And the reason mines have been searched, let's remind everyone, is that Josh had once said, what did Josh once say about a mine?
He told one of Susan's friends that a mine would be a really good place to hide a dead body because there's so many of them and they would never be found.
Yeah. And many, many mines have been searched, but this is the first time this one had been.
Well, the police went out and looked on January 11th, 2010, down this mine. And
Okay.
at the time, they, as far as I understand, we don't know if they took a camera down there or not because we don't have any records of it, but we do have pictures from January 11th of 2010. So this would be just about a little bit over a month after she went missing. And at the time, the wooden framework at the top of the mine was still there. It hadn't been touched, it hadn't been vandalized. And the police looked down it and took pictures of it and said, all right, well, she's not here, let's move on. So we know that as of January 11th, nobody had touched it, vandalized it, bothered it. On June 26th, a group went out to search that mine. This was also in 2010, so about a little over 5 months later. And they started to go down inside of that mine, and they found that they couldn't because the timbers were still smoking and burning. And at that point, the vandalism had happened. Somebody had set them on fire. They'd all collapsed down inside of the mine. And so this group that was trying to search it was not able to search it, and they had to call off the search.
Okay. Chuck Cox, Susan's dad, was quoted as saying he just felt really confident that these remains were his daughter, Susan, and I hoped that they were, which is such a bizarre thing to say out loud, but I wanted them to have closure. It's been, as we pointed out, over a decade. It's been what, 12 years? 12 years since she went missing in 2009 in December. And I had hoped for closure. How is Chuck and Susan's family doing with the news that these are not Susan's remains? How are they doing?
I don't know how Susan's sisters and mother are doing because I've only talked to her father, but Chuck says that he still feels optimistic. He still has hope that we'll find her. And he's very grateful that this search has brought a huge surge of interest back into Susan's case. We've had thousands and thousands of people that never heard of her story or heard it a long time, or maybe they were kids when she first disappeared and now they're finally hearing about it as adults. And so much interest has been brought back to the case, and a lot of people have stepped forward offering help, and a lot of interest is there to find Susan, a lot of resources that we didn't have back then. And so we're really grateful for that. And he feels pretty hopeful that all of this interest and all of these offers of help will hopefully lead to us finding her. He hasn't given up yet.
Yes, in 12 years, a lot has changed, technology-wise, but also the internet, true crime sleuth. As you know, I retired from news to do a podcast and to share different crimes that we feel are important for the public to know. And so that is true. More publicity for Susan could mean finding her no matter what.
Yeah, I've always been extremely grateful for the media because they have shared her story far and wide. We had, back in the early days after she disappeared, there were news crews that came over from France. Japan did a special on her. We had people from Russia and Israel joining our Facebook group. And even now we have people every day saying, hey, I'm in Australia, I'm in the UK. I'm there for you guys. I'm praying for you, and we really hope you find her. And it's been just really great to have all of the support and help from people across the world all of these years.
As you said, again, that one quote from our interview that I was revisiting this morning before we talked, the why is it taking so long? Could you have imagined then, that was 2011 when we talked 2 years after she disappeared, that 10 years later, we'd be here today? I mean, how are you? You've been her spokesperson for, as I said, 12 years.
Yeah, it's funny because when she first disappeared and I heard about it on that Monday, December 7th in 2009, I just felt so much panic. And then we heard that Josh was back that night with the boys, but she wasn't with him. And it morphed into thinking, oh no, what has he done? And I never could have imagined he would do something like that before. And I expected him, if he really cared and if he was innocent, to step up and be her spokesperson and to spread the word and to go on TV and tell people everywhere, my wife's missing, please help us find her. I'll do anything. But he never was. And that just made him look even guiltier. And it's been a long time. I never thought it would take this long. When she first disappeared, I thought to myself, surely this won't take 3 months. Surely we'll have answers. We'll be able to find her in the next couple of weeks. And then 3 months passed, and then a year, and then we were doing the 10-year anniversary. And now we just barely did the 10-year anniversary we passed the 10-year anniversary of Charlie and Braden's murders. And it's
right, just this month, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just this month.
Yep.
It hit 10 years since they were murdered.
Right. And there's days when it just feels so overwhelming, and you kind of want to just crumble and despair and just think, why did this happen to someone who was so good and so loving and so kind? And it still feels like a nightmare sometimes. But my faith is really strong, and I know that a lot of good has come from sharing Susan's story across the world, and that she would be really happy if she knew how many women and children her story has helped save. I have personally had quite a few women send me messages over the years telling me, I just want you to know that your friend did not die in vain. She didn't die for nothing. That because of her, because I came across her story, I recognized the signs in my own relationship, and I knew that I was going to be next if I didn't get myself and my kids out. And because of her, we're alive today. And that brings a lot of comfort, and I'm really grateful that her story has helped so many people.
Thank you for sharing that. One thing we talk a lot about here at Hidden True Crime, and the cases that we want to cover are those of domestic abuse and violence. And I know that you were a confidant of Susan as well, and she talked about her marriage with you. Before we get there, I do want to ask you about that. First, take me back to how you met Susan. You knew her even before she had children.
Yes. So my husband and I had recently finished college, and we bought a house in West Valley City, and we moved in. And for the first time in our married life, we actually had time for social life because we weren't going to school. And we already had 3 small children. And so we started trying to become part of our new neighborhood and our new church congregation, and tried to make some friends. But a lot of the other young couples our age were still really busy with college and work. And so one day, Josh and Susan showed up at church, and I believe this was in 2004. I'd have to go back and look at my past blog entries because it's been a long time. But anyway, they showed up, and we went up and welcomed them to church and to the area and introduced ourselves. And we said, hey, if you guys want to come over sometime, we could play games or something. And they said, oh, sure. And then we thought, well, they're probably going to be busy just like everyone else, and it probably won't happen. But it was nice to say hi. And then the very next Sunday when we got to church, Susan came up to us and she said, so is today good? And we just kind of stared at her, and we were like, what do you mean? And she's like, you guys invited us over. Is today good? Are you backing out? And we were like, oh, okay, yeah, cool. You could come over. That's totally fine. And so they came over that night, and we played a bunch of board games and had a really great time and just really hit it off, and we're fast friends after that.
And you got to know Josh too.
We did. We were friends with Josh as much as you can be friends with Josh, or as you could be friends with Josh. He was always really kind of strange and had a lot of obsessions. And I get it, because I get obsessed with different things. Like I might be really into bird watching for a couple of years and then have a new interest, but he just really took it over the top. When we first moved in, they had bought a house that needed a lot of repairs, and he was super excited about putting in a sprinkler system for his backyard to water his garden. And he just talked about that for hours and hours and hours, and nothing else but his sprinkler system. Huh. And then a few months went by, and we got really sick of it. And sometimes Susan would say, Josh, enough with the sprinkler system. We're sick of it. Let's move on to a new topic. And then sometimes she'd make comments like, hey, when you're making friends with people, you need to let them have a chance to talk about their interests too. And then he'd
She
move
tried to
on.
help him socially a little
She
bit.
did try to help him, yeah. And then a few months passed and he got into some new obsession. And so it was always like that with him. He just loved talking, and he talked louder than everyone else and longer than everyone else, and didn't really let you get a word in edgewise much, because he wanted to go on and on about whatever he was interested in.
So just kind of self-absorbed, would you say?
I think very self-absorbed, not really aware or necessarily caring about other people's feelings, and not really paying attention to what else was going on in the conversation. I think a lot, very, very into what he wanted to be into.
When you first met Susan, she didn't talk about divorce. It was maybe he was awkward, but things seemed okay. When did she start opening up to you about some serious problems in her marriage with Josh?
I'd really have to go back into all of the emails we sent each other back then, but I do know that things were quite bad in 2008. And so I think she probably started talking about it in 2007. And it all started because Josh started talking to his father, Steve Powell. And he talked to him at least once a week, if not twice a week, for hours at a time. And as soon as he started doing that on a regular basis, things deteriorated really fast. And Susan would tell me, man, he was fine. We were doing all right until he talked to his dad. And every time he gets off the phone with his dad, he's so mean. He's so nasty. He makes awful comments. He just argues with me constantly, and he's just horrible. And I know that his dad tells him all of these things to try to break us up. And she just told me more and more about how Josh would deteriorate after he talked to his dad, until it got to the point where Josh quit going to church. He quit being willing to participate in family scripture reading that she wanted to do. He didn't want her to pay tithing to the church or to volunteer with her jobs at church, or just really to do anything that would help them to be peaceful and to promote their marriage closeness.
Because he was very religious, the LDS church. He was very religious when they got married, and even proposed in a bit of a religious way. And so that was, for a young couple, it was like a 180, would you say?
I don't know if he was ever very religious, because he wasn't really active in the church until around the time he met Susan.
Okay.
He was pretty unhappy with his life, and he was talking to his mom one day, and his mom said, well, why don't you go to the Institute? That's a scripture classes, free scripture classes for college-aged students or people. And she said, they have some kids your age and you might enjoy the activities. And so he went to that. And I believe that is where he met Susan and got to talk to her, even though
she was young. She was young. And so it was a moment in time. It was like Susan was in this, we could call it a wrong time, at the wrong place. And he was religious for this moment.
Right.
And she was, what, 20 when she met him?
I'd have to look at the timelines and the ages. I don't know, but she was pretty young, and he was older than her. And he had originally liked her older sister, and he had seen Susan at her house when she was even younger, but he hadn't noticed her at the time until he met her again at Institute.
Okay. And it was a quick dating and quick engagement where and there were people concerned. I know you didn't know her then, but now there were some people concerned about her marriage to him. Is that right?
Right. Her parents especially were not happy with it. They didn't like him. They didn't have a good feeling about him. They didn't want her to rush into it. But a lot of times when kids are that age, they don't want to listen to their parents. And she was kind of like, well, I'm in love and I'm going to get married, and it's so romantic. He's older and he's got a place to live, and so it's fine. And so
she said all the right things.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know you don't know what people are capable of when you're that young.
Right. She believed him, and she told me later, he's not at all the person I married. He's so different. He's completely changed. And I started to wonder after she disappeared, well, maybe he was always like this. Maybe he just pretended, or temporarily covered it up, or temporarily broke free from the curse of his dad and the path that he was taking almost all of his children on, and then just got sucked back into it.
Were most of Susan's complaints about him religious complaints, or was there something, I mean, there was clearly something deeper than that, but could she pinpoint what it was, or how he
Well,
would treat her?
yeah, it was a lot of relationship issues. He would yell at her. He quit being loving in any way. He wouldn't do things for her anymore. He wouldn't kiss her. He wouldn't hold her hand. It got to a point one day when we were sitting in my backyard and we just had a barbecue. I think it was after church or something. And he was saying, I really want my husband, John, he's telling John, I really want you to teach me to program. And John's like, well, I did it my whole life. And then I went to school for 4 years and got a degree in programming. I can't just teach you how to program so you can go get a programming job. Oh, I'm sure I could pick it up in no time. I just want you to teach me programming. And my husband's like, well, I do it all day long. Why would I come home and spend my evenings teaching you how to program instead of spending time with my wife and kids? That's what I'd rather do. And Josh just wouldn't let up, and he kept on all afternoon trying to get my husband to teach him programming in his free time. And so finally I turned to him and I said, all right, Josh, I'll make you a deal. If you go to church one Sunday a month with Susan, and if you take 10 or 20 minutes once a week and sit next to Susan and hold her hand and talk to her, John will teach you how to program. And my husband looked at me and he's like, what? I will? Well, okay, I guess if you'll do that. And Josh was like, I don't know. That's asking a lot. I don't think I can do that. And I was like, Josh, this is 10 or 20 minutes a week that I'm asking you to sit next to Susan and hold her hand and talk to her and go to church once a month. How is that a lot when my husband's agreeing to spend hours and hours and hours of his free time teaching you how to program? And so he finally agreed and said he would do it for a few months. And we were just, both my husband and I were just desperate to try to help them because we loved Susan so much. We saw how miserable she was, and we saw how much she was trying to save her marriage and to be happy again. And so we wanted to help her. And so that went on for only a couple of months, I think, before Josh decided that he could learn on his own, or my husband got fed up with him. I don't remember which, but he didn't put very much effort into it.
Yeah. You were younger too then. We were all younger then. Susan's my age. So I think that's actually probably why it hit close to home when she went missing in a place that was close to where I grew up. But I guess my point is you've probably learned a lot too. Do you have any regrets, or do you realize things you wish you would have done differently?
I wish that I would have even dreamed that Josh would ever hurt her. I never dreamed. I mean, I asked her once, has he ever hit you or done anything physical to you? And she said no. I now know that wasn't true. I just heard last week about a fight that they had where she hit him and he hit her back. But she didn't tell me that at the time. That she said, no, he hasn't. She said, one time we got in a really bad fight. We were screaming and I shoved him really hard. And he said, if you ever do that again, I'm going to hit you back. But he's never hit me. And I said, well, all his other stuff is emotional abuse. And I started to encourage her to go talk to a divorce lawyer and to really, I said, I never would normally advise someone to get divorced. But in your case, I don't think he's going to change. I think things are just going to get worse and you should get out so you won't be miserable. And she told me, I'm really afraid that he's going to take me to court over and over and over again and take the kids away from me, because that's what his dad did to his mom. He dragged her into court over and over and over again for years and basically bankrupted her until she had no stamina and no will and no money left to fight it. And he ended up with all of the kids except for Jennifer, who got away because she was old enough to be on her own. And they all turned out like him and they all went down his path. And Josh has told me that you will never have these kids if we ever got divorced unless it was over my dead body. And so she was really worried that if she started divorce proceedings, that he was going to maybe kidnap the kids and disappear. And so that was her biggest worry. And I even said to her one time, well, what if he tried to get in a fight with you or something? And she flexed her muscles and she laughed and she goes, oh, I'm way, way stronger than him. I work out and he doesn't. I could take him. So I never dreamed that he would actually really do something to her physically. I thought the worst that would happen is that he would fight her in court for custody of the kids, and that it would be a long, drawn-out mess. I wish I'd known then what I know now. I wish I'd known that it was going to go this way. I wish I'd seen any kind of violent tendencies in him, because I would have gone to her house and insisted she call the police and that they stay there and wait while she packed stuff and got out. I wish that on the day that she disappeared, when we walked home from church together at noon, and she was talking about the church services and saying how glad she was that Charlie and Braden had played quietly and let her listen and enjoy the services. I wish that I had followed through on my instinct to invite her in and say, hey, why don't you come over and spend the afternoon with me? I don't know if anything would have changed if I had, but I had the thought come into my mind, and then I thought, oh, my house is a mess, and Charlie and Braden are full of pent-up energy right now, and I'll just wait until Wednesday on her next day off. I wish I had.
Yeah, that was the last day anyone saw her. You were not the last person to see her, but you saw her on the last day anyone did see her. And while I did ask you about your regrets, I also hope that you've found peace realizing that there was probably nothing that you could have known back then. That's probably a lot of what you've learned is because this happened, and I don't know if there's any way you could have known. So I just want you to know that.
I do think that Josh had a plan in place for months. I think that he had planned to do away with her in February of that year, and it didn't work out. And so I think he'd been planning it for a long time. So he probably would have gone through with it no matter what.
I agree. I agree with what you just said. I think there was a lot of planning that was involved. What did Susan tell you about Steve Powell, her father-in-law? Steve, by the way, is now deceased. He died in prison. He
was actually out of prison at the time.
Oh, he was out of prison. Thank you for that correction.
Mm-hmm.
He went to prison for voyeurism. They, in searching his house where Josh was living with Charlie and Braden, his sons, they found that he had been taping the neighbor girls in the bathroom. And so he was charged with a separate crime. But he quickly invited Josh into his home in Washington after Susan went missing in Utah. He quickly left the state. Susan did not like her father-in-law. Can you tell me a little bit about what she told you about him?
When Josh and Susan first moved here, I asked them what made them decide to move to Utah. And they originally said, oh, we just wanted a fresh start. We just wanted a new place. And our last job wasn't really working out. We didn't like it that much. And so we figured we'd move here so we could be close to Josh's amazing sister, Jennifer. And then after I had known Susan for a couple of years, she confessed to me that that was not the whole reason, that the main reason that she wanted to move to Utah was to get away from Josh's dad, Steve Powell. And I stared at her and I said, why? Is he a horrible person? And she said, he is the devil incarnate. And then she started to tell me how she and Josh had to live with him for a little while after they were married, and that he didn't have an extra bedroom because of all of his kids that were still living there. So he put a sheet or a curtain over the dining room, and that's where they stayed for their bedroom. And one day, as she was getting dressed in their bedroom, she saw a camera peeking around the curtain. And she found out that his dad, Josh's dad, Steve, was videotaping her and taking pictures of her as she was changing. She also saw that he was trying to get a camera under the bathroom door once, and he tried to kiss her. And so after this, she was like, all right, that's it. We're leaving. We're get me away from him. And she made Josh move out, and she wanted to get as far away from him as she could. She told Josh, if he ever comes to Utah, he is not stepping one foot in our house because I will not have his disgusting evil presence in my home. So you're going to go visit him somewhere else, and I'm not coming. And he also, one time after she moved to Utah, he sent her a packet of pictures of her favorite actor. And she was thinking at first when she opened it, well, that was actually a nice gesture. Maybe he's grown up some or turned a new leaf. And then she was going through the pictures in it. And as she did, she found a bunch of random pictures of naked men that he had put in there. And so she burned them, threw them away, and once again said to Josh, he's never stepping foot in our house. And it was okay until Josh started talking to his dad weekly, and things went downhill pretty fast after that.
Yeah, Josh didn't seem too worried about how his dad treated Susan. And evidence later did show us that he was incredibly obsessed with Susan, her father-in-law, and that he was in love with her and would make recordings and sing to her, and had indeed taped her and filmed her as well. Yeah.
as well as stealing her clothes.
Yeah, undergarments, right?
Yep.
Yeah, her underwear.
Yeah, and doing a lot worse. I feel very sorry for anybody who has gone through his journals and read them, because they are horrible. They are absolutely horrible.
Yeah. Charlie and Braden. That is, in my opinion, the biggest tragedy in all of this. I remember thinking of you when that happened. Like I said, we had just talked 2 months prior, and then they were killed by their father. Tell me a little bit about those boys.
So Charlie and Braden were only just barely, or I guess almost 3 and 5, but they were 2 and 4 when Susan disappeared. So I didn't have massive insights into them. They were just normal, typical, happy boys, mischievous, getting into trouble, making messes. But Susan loved them more than anything in the world. The things that were most important to her was her faith in her family, and she loved being a mom. When we first met, she said to me, "We've never been friends with anyone that has kids before, so we'll see how it goes, and we'll give you guys a trial run and see if we can be friends." And then she laughed. And then she started, after a little while, she started talking about how much she wanted to be a mom. And then when she was pregnant, she was so happy and just couldn't wait for Charlie to be born. And she loved them so much. And she would tell me often how much she wished she didn't have to work, because she wanted so much to be home with them and to spend all day, every day with them. And that she hated having to send them off to daycare, even though she knew that Debbie, their daycare provider, was like a grandma to them and was wonderful and amazing. She just really wished she could be home with them. Her boys were everything to her. And when people suggested after she disappeared, well, maybe she ran off. And when Steve and Josh came out with their theory that she ran off and was living a life up in Brazil with a false identity, I just thought, man, how could you not only kill her and put her family through all this, but then try to say that she would leave her kids? Because she would never do that. She loved them more than anything. She would give up her life for them.
Yeah. Right, exactly. And one reason she did have to work was because Josh wasn't reliable with keeping a job, right?
Absolutely. Yep. She had to work because he would try one thing and then it wouldn't work out. He would get fired, or he didn't like it, or he didn't like being told what to do. So then he tried to be a realtor, and he didn't really sell hardly any houses. And so she had to get a job because they just didn't have enough money coming in to pay their bills.
Yeah. It's been 12 years. There was some possible hope for some closure. As you point out, there still is. They're still doing some testing. The bones are not hers. The remains are not hers, but they're going to still be doing some testing on the clothing and articles that were found. If 12 years later, if Susan was here with us now, sitting at a table with you, what would you say to her?
Boy, I told myself I wasn't going to cry. But just imagining a reunion with her is a wonderful thought. I would want to tell her that we've tried so hard, we've looked so hard, that we have not given up and we will never give up. Sometimes people will make comments in our Facebook group, "Well, guys, just give it a rest. She's gone, just move on." Like, well, I'm sorry. I have moved on in a way, and as in I'm taking care of my family, I'm living my life, I'm following my dreams, but she's still missing. And even though I know that her spirit is up in heaven with her boys, and that they're together and they're happy and that no one can ever hurt them again, I still want to find her, because that's a piece that's still missing. And I think that it would be nice to really be able to bury her next to her boys. And we're never going to give up looking for her. And I wish I could tell her how much we love her. Hopefully she knows, and how much so many people across the world love her, and how many people she's helped.
Thank you. If there's one thing you wanted people to understand about domestic violence, or what would that be? Someone, a woman in a similar situation, what would you share?
I would like all women everywhere to know that domestic violence does not mean physical abuse only. That if you are with somebody who talks down to you or tries to control you or tries to pull you away from your family and your friends, doesn't want you to spend time with them, only wants you to be with your partner, these are not good signs. You don't want to be with someone who's going to try to control you. You want to be with someone who wants to uplift you, who wants to celebrate you, who wants to help you accomplish your dreams. And if you're not with someone like that, then you need to get out before things escalate and before you might end up like Susan, because there's an awful lot of people out there that are like Josh, unfortunately.
Well said. Thank you. I want to share that the domestic abuse hotline number is 1-800-799-7233. And you can also text, which I think is a wonderful thing because some people can't talk. You can text START, START, to 88788. I'll throw that in the description of this video as well. Anything else you want to say?
We're so grateful for the love and the support and the prayers of people around the world. Please keep praying for Susan and her family. Well, Susan's fine, but her family, that we'll be able to find her. And if you have a friend or a family member that you see some of these troubling signs in their relationship, please help them. Sometimes they don't realize it and they need somebody else to step in and help, because Susan didn't realize how bad it had gotten.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kiirsi.